Okay, well, why don't we kick off? Thank you all very much for joining. I'm Marco Del Carlo, CEO of Capacity Place. Joining me is Leo Ramberg. You can see there, Leo's decided to join me recently at Capacity Place, and the head of my tech agency, Nathan, who's over there as well. Everyone's mic's been turned off. Session is being recorded accordingly. I plan to speak for around 40 minutes or so. I'll take questions throughout, but you can also use the chat facility that's available there at the bottom if there's questions that you want to ask, and then I'll just do Q&A at the end for anything else that you guys may want to go through. What I'm going to go through is a sort of PowerPoint presentation just to cover off various aspects of Capacity Place, and at the end do a bit of a demo. For those that are interested, I'll actually send out the slides as well that we're going to go through afterwards to all of the participants. So so you don't need to worry about copying things down or the like. So with that in mind, I'm going to just go into I'm going to go do a share screen on this. This is the first time that we are having a webinar, so undoubtedly there will be some things that we're going to get right, some things we're going to get wrong, but we'll give it a shot. Can everyone see a PowerPoint presentation there? Is there a PowerPoint presentation? View, give me a second.
Yeah, all good.
All good. Admit all. Excellent. Okay, so right. So just to recap, I'm sure that you know, knowing the audience is here, I think most people know something about Capacity Place, but at its most basic level, it's intended to be a matchmaking platform between capacity seekers and capacity providers for insurance programs. Basically, if you can think of it kind of like Match.com for insurance programs, the design of it is about bringing those you know, companies that are seeking capacity for themselves or for their clients with various different types of risk carriers in the market. So it's used by lots of different types of companies seeking capacity, MGAs, brokers, wholesale brokers, retail brokers, placing brokers, different agencies, management teams. It can also be used by reinsurance buyers in the market, and that is to match them up with different sources of capacity. So insurers, reinsurers, various Lloyd's players, fronters, ILS, PCCs, and mutuals. That's the crux of it. Today, I mean, our main focus is really around delegated authority programs, but it also supports treaty programs as well. Delegated authorities where most of the focus tends to be and most of the challenges are, and I think most of the people that are on the call today, that's probably going to be their key area of interest. So agenda for today, again, as I just went through it, what we'll go through is, first of all, just what the traditional program placement process actually is. So how does it normally work? Then what are we doing in terms of accelerating program placements? What are the different things in terms of what makes Capacity Place what it is? We'll talk about matching programs and then marketing those to capacity providers and how that works. What we do to safeguard business sensitive information. We'll kind of guide you through sort of creating a program listing, and then they'll have a quick demo, sort of very 5-minute demo of what does the platform actually look like, and then go into Q&A. So those that are familiar with program placements, the general placement process looks something like this. Everyone will do it somewhat differently, but you know, before you're going to place a program, you do an awful lot of information gathering. Programs tend to be extremely information intensive and getting more so. You do an awful lot typically of business planning, actuarial work, put together an awful lot of collateral marketing materials for the placement activity. Then you move into the placement where basically you are trying to look at, well, which markets are going to be interested in this, which insurers, which reinsurers, how should it be structured accordingly. You then go out to a number of different insurers. You then contact them. You build relationships. You go through an awful lot of evaluation, due diligence at multiple stages. You get sign off of your coverage forms, ratings, guidelines. You put out your binders and any other type of authority letters, and then after you've completed the placement activity, that often gets implemented. There's lots of changes to operations, systems, governance. You have to sort out how premiums and border are going to be processed. There's often audit in terms of interaction, and then claims activities as well take place. So some companies will do this themselves. A lot of companies will use placing brokers to do a lot of this because it is a lot of heavy lifting. Capacity Place supports both models. From a capacity seeker's perspective, that's sort of the broad process. What we find kind of different, I suppose, is what actually takes place behind the scenes, and this is probably something that that I think we see, and all the people that are kind of in this market, but particularly the placing brokers, probably see. Typically, you have a cover holder, a placing broker that will deal with someone within a capacity provider. I'll call them a business developer, but it could be one underwriter in one area trying to get to the other underwriter who who's responsible for an area that for which this program is of interest, is typically trying to, at a first stage, qualify the program. They're trying to say, does this fit within our risk appetite? Does it fit within our overall portfolio? Is it incremental? How does it work accordingly? And typically just trying to get the main elements to say, is this something that we as an insurer or capacity provider, risk carrier, want to entertain? And typically they'll then go to an underwriting committee or a number of other people within there to quickly sound that out. And then if that's the case, they'll then do they'll do basically a deep dive on the program itself. And that will typically involve an awful lot of consultations with, sort of up to 15 different departments. We find they'll have to do actuarial, reinsurance, finance, legal wordings, and the like. And then the underwriters will typically go back forth with each of those departments. The underwriter will then go back to the placing broker or the cover holder and say, this is the additional information that is needed. And that process will then go back to the placing broker, back to the underwriter, back to different departments as such. And so what you see in this is sort of an awful lot of handoff, which is sort of slow, it's inefficient. There's a lot of informational risk because information is getting passed from party to party, which creates certainly a lot of concern. The departments themselves seem to be growing. So, I think the placing brokers probably on the call would probably see this more than anyone, is that the number of internal stakeholders that seem to need to be satisfied around getting programs over the line is growing. A lot of that is driven based on the growth of these departments, if you will, is emanating in large part because of regulatory requirements coming out of solvency legislation, prudential legislation, and the like. So the process basically has gotten a lot more complex, complicated over time, and it is a very information-intensive process. This is why programs on the whole tend to take an awful long time. Once it does go back and there is kind of an agreement in principle and a lot of these checks and consultations have been done, it'll go back to an underwriting committee typically for approval. And then if it's a Lloyd's book as such as well, there may be additional steps insofar as Lloyd's is concerned for cover holder approval and business plan approval. So it's pretty painful process overall. Sort of some of the way I kind of summarize it in terms of the observations that that I've got is that then when we look at delegated authority placements in particular, it's more akin to M&A in terms of an M&A transaction than to placing insurance risks. It's just the number of involvements and reviews and sharing of information and confidentiality as such. Information requirements have absolutely skyrocketed in the last 10 years because of external parties typically requiring additional information, and that's weighting a lot of things down. Certainly the departments the risk carriers have proliferated, and there's increased risk of misuse accordingly. One of the challenges, I think, in terms of everybody having in our market is actually, who do you talk with? How do you get to the right people to build those relationships and navigate through to getting things over the line? For that reason, I think one of the things that we see is that the hit rates on program placements tends to be quite low. And they take a long time, so it is an area of sort of a frustration, if you will. Underwriters who I would say 10 to 15 years ago used to be able to make decisions and principles around programs, nowadays have been sort of turned into what I would call internal project managers, where they no longer have the decision-making authority. In fact, their job is to coordinate among lots of other stakeholders, get their input, gather it, manage it accordingly. As we all know, placement timeframes have elongated, and one of the things I think that we're starting to see or we've been seeing is a lot more declinature, certainly in recent years. The more declinature isn't necessarily bad, but often they're happening in later stages of the process, which then creates increased placement risk. So it's sort of a frustrating thing on the whole, in terms of how it all works. And it's just due to complex transactions that are demanding from an informational perspective. So we launched Capacity Place, and we're trying to do some things to accelerate the program placements as a whole, to make it a lot more efficient accordingly. So one of the things that we're doing is we're using, first thing that we're doing is we're using marketplace technology and digital marketing activities, a combination of those two things, to facilitate greater and faster information exchange, basically to take programs that are available, get them to more capacity providers quicker, and create competition for those programs. Basically create that marketplace that today doesn't really exist. The current process, which I think, outside of Capacity Place is typically done, is to say, well, which markets do we go to, and then approach those markets accordingly. And that needs to be done sort of in sequential manner, and you're going kind of one at a time accordingly. The way Capacity Place works is, because it's a marketplace, basically once that program is up and it's on the site, it's available to everybody immediately, except for those for which it's hidden. And that's a very different sort of approach to securing interest from capacity providers around programs. Because because of the nature of it being an exchange, it's electronically accessible when underwriters have availability. That typically means that, many times underwriters look at programs not so much. Sorry, give me one sec. There's a couple people in the waiting room apparently. It's not so much, many times underwriters will look at delegated authority programs on an exceptions basis, not on a, they're not sort of, proactively looking at it. Many times, different risk carriers already have existing books of business, and what they're asking is this book of business incremental to what we underwrite today? How does it fit within my portfolio? And they're always looking for things that are incremental. The challenge there is that it, from an outside perspective, you don't exactly know what is incremental to their portfolio, because it requires an understanding of their portfolio, and it requires an understanding of the movements in terms of other business that they're looking at, business they might be coming off, et cetera, et cetera. So this actually, what we're trying to do is basically make sure that programs are there, ready, available when different capacity providers are looking at different programs. And then we efficiently and intelligently match those programs, which I'm going to come on to. And then just in terms of what we're trying to do, we're not trying to be a broker. What we're just trying to do is enable direct communications between the parties. So once parties connect, we allow those that are seeking capacity and those that are providing capacity to talk directly. And it's that facilitation of direct things, reduce the number of handoffs between the various parties. So that's one of the ways in which we're trying to accelerate capacity placements. Second thing is that we ask a lot more questions up front, and by asking a lot more questions up front of capacity seekers and their programs, that does a couple things. First of all, is it enables underwriters to qualify programs quicker against their criteria and say, yeah, this is of interest, or no, it's not. Often underwriters at risk carriers get information and then they're like, well, it's just, I have questions about this and about this and about this. And the challenge is then they have to go back to different parties and they can't give a quick response back. So one of the things that we're trying to do is bring more information up front to expedite that process. The second thing is that because the process very much is that, underwriters, then have to consult all these other departments, what we're also trying to do basically is ask a lot of those questions to reduce a lot of those later stage declinatures. Third thing that we do is we provide a range of free templates, and I'll go into the template library afterwards, but that's designed basically like, I've looked at some, I don't know, 500 business plans over the last 8 or 9 years, and for the majority of them, they're not very good. There's a lot of very poor quality business plans, very poor quality documents that are out there. I think better documentation up front certainly helps the process of securing capacity. The last thing that we're doing is that we have a data room that we use to accelerate organizational due diligence. And again, it comes down to that, we were looking a few slides before around underwriters then having to become project managers, liaising with all these different departments. What we're trying to do basically is to create a single source of information that's there. Give me one sec here. Is there anyone waiting? No, okay. So we're using a data room concept to that if you're an underwriter, you like a program, then you can invite in other stakeholders from within your company, from various departments, to look at exactly the same information accordingly to, again, accelerate that process. So the way that it works on Capacity Place is, first of all, it's you create a program listing. Or we call adding a program, where you go through an 8-stage guided questionnaire. Some of you, I think, have already been through that. Some of you haven't, or those that, there's a few people, I think, on the call that are live on there. Once you've completed that questionnaire, the program listing is live on Capacity Place. Once you've done that, what we're then doing is figuring out ways basically of getting the program out to relevant capacity providers. And that's done in a number of different ways, which I'm going to come on to in a sec. From that, it's to make that program available to capacity providers so that they can actually look at it, view it, and then directly contact the company seeking capacity. So whether that's a broker or an MGA and the like, they can just directly through the site make contact. And we'll give you a little bit of a demo afterwards as to what that looks like. Once that's done, then you move on to more the program qualification, where again, there's, it's set up a call, discuss further. At that stage, you can grant the capacity seeker, your capacity provider can request access to the data room that can then be granted accordingly by the capacity seeker if they feel comfortable, and an NDA can be agreed commensurately with that. And then once that's done, in terms of next stage, you go into a due diligence contractual negotiation stage, much like what you do today. There's a 5th stage that's on this that we haven't quite covered off, but we call it a capacity tracker. This is like, as a capacity seeker, you're often talking to multiple markets at the same time. So behind the scenes, as capacity providers are looking at your programs, making contact, requesting access, and you're at different stages, the capacity tracker sort of acts like an Excel spreadsheet, basically, that allows you to track and monitor where different capacity providers are at in terms of your discussions with them. Sorry, maybe I'll pause there. Any questions up until now? Or should I just continue on?
No, keep going, Marco. I think we're all on mute. But...
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, a lot on mute, but carry on, Marco.
Okay.
No Q&A at the end.
You're doing a great job. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, hopefully this is is at it's a fairly fast-paced sort of thing. So one of the big things is that once a program is actually up and live on the site, There are 4 different things that we're doing basically to get that into the hands of capacity providers. So the first one is online search, filter, and sort. So this is much like you have if you go onto eBay or Amazon or any site that's out there that you're looking at that. Carriers can go on, punch in a keyword, use filtering capability to filter based on a number of different criteria. So class, territory, size, et cetera, to say this is kind of what I'm looking for. And then you can also sort by relevance, sort by what's newest, what's oldest, and the like. And so that capability is now embedded, and I'll give you a little demo of that, what that looks like. But we all know that in our marketplace, very few capacity providers actually go on to a platform and proactively do that. We actually do have a few who actually do that, but most of them tend to be, I find that most carriers in the market tend to be reactive rather than proactive. They don't just go out there and do that. They wait for things to come to them. And I think that's part of just how how we have a broker underwriter market. In terms of the way it works, brokers usually pitch, underwriters usually respond, and in our marketplace, underwriters tend to be reactive. So for that, one of the things that we're doing that's just about to launch is we call it a program opportunities email. So what that is that every week or technically day, any underwriter who is, or any capacity provider who is on the platform receives an email to say, here are the newest programs that are on Capacity Place. So with that, they can then just click on that program and then be brought to Capacity Place and look through the details of that program. So again, it makes it easy for them. We're initially, I think it's 8 a.m. on Monday morning on a weekly schedule that email will go out. In the capacity provider dashboard, they will have notification, the ability to be notified either daily, weekly, or just turn it off accordingly. And we're just testing this out as we speak. So it's one of the things that Nathan's been working on accordingly. The third thing that we're doing is that there's a number of markets right now that aren't on Capacity Place. I think up to now we probably have 37 markets on it, but that's usually individuals within those markets. So what we're also doing is when a program is uploaded onto the platform, we'll look at the program and think, okay, who would this be of interest to in a targeted marketing sort of way, and then send them an email to say, okay, there's a program that's here on Capacity Place that we think fits your risk criteria. Here's some bullet points on what the program looks like. Here's a link to it. Go have a look. So in that way, that what we're trying to do is proactively support capacity seekers with additional offline marketing to being able to do that, to get capacity providers, more and more capacity providers online. That then when they come online, basically they then get a program opportunities email with those same sort of things. So it's all about sort of building up scale, if you will. The last thing that we're doing is this thing called recommendations, and recommendations is when capacity providers register a Capacity Place, in their dashboard, they can set their matching preferences. So they set matching preferences for class and territory. And what we do is we look at each of the programs that are out there in terms of the attributes, and what we do is we have a matching algorithm that we use to bring those two of those together to then determine which programs should we recommend to the capacity provider based on what their matching preferences are. So basically what we're trying to do is assimilate risk appetite. So we use class, territory, and we'll probably add some more attributes to that in due course. But basically from this, if there's hundreds of programs that are up there, what we're trying to do is basically say, these are the programs that are going to be most relevant to you based on what your risk appetite looks like. So, and that's how we do it. And if for those that are really interested, I'm happy to talk to you offline in terms of how exactly we do that. But it's sort of like you basically are utilizing data to get better fit. So someone who writes a German motor program is probably not going to be interested in Florida wind. So what we're trying to do is match sort of class, territory for those that there's a decent enough fit with that. Yet if someone is writing a Norwegian management liability program if there was a Finnish PI program. That's fairly close. So we've got an algorithm that we use to determine what the proximity is of a program to what the matching preferences are of a particular capacity provider. And that'll become more and more relevant as we move forward, as the platform gets scale. Okay, next question. We get a lot of I started out my life as as an MGA, run a few MGAs, and you recognize that as part of this securing capacity process, in terms of bringing that together, information flows very one way. It's very one way from those that are seeking capacity to those that are providing capacity, and there's certainly a risk of misuse there. Accordingly. And so the platform has been designed with a number of safeguards in mind in terms of how to actually protect a lot of that business sensitive information. So the first thing is that only capacity providers have access to program listings. So if you put your program listing up, the only people that can see it are any users that are registered as capacity providers. In order to be registered as a capacity provider, you need to be employed by an authorized risk carrier. Nobody else can. You can't be a broker, can't be a management team, an MGA, a lawyer, whoever, and say, I'm a capacity provider. It doesn't work like that. Capacity providers are vetted up front. They have to be employed by an authorized risk carrier. So it's only employees of those that have access to program listings. For many, certainly in the market, knowing that your competitors cannot look at your programs, if you will, is really important. Richard Hayes raised his hand. Yes, Richard.
Yeah, just one question on that.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
If you have, as you just said, only authorized insurers, what can they see? So let's say, for instance, I have a binder with...
Richard, we're coming to that in the end.
Yeah, we'll come to that, Richard.
So
Good, excellent question.
Feel how it all works.
Oh, I can't believe it. I've been thinking about this for the last 10 seconds. Okay, bye.
I like that. Raise the hand. Okay, so the second thing is that capacity seekers can also hide program listings from specific risk carriers or unrated carriers generally. This is really important. We call this the Ashley Madison feature for anyone that's, we put out a video on this, but we call it the Ashley Madison feature because often there are a number of people that, in the Ashley Madison case, if you were having an affair on your spouse, then the one person that you don't want looking at your dating profile is your spouse. In our case, if you are a capacity seeker, there's often different markets that you won't want to look at your program. So if you've got existing capacity providers, if you have capacity providers that you're speaking with offline, if you've got competitors in the market, if you're currently employed by someone and you're looking to leave, like say, for example, you were a team at Zurich and you were looking to leave Zurich and set up your own business, then you don't want anyone from Zurich looking at it. Through Capacity Place, you can hide your program listings from specifically named carriers, and in that way, you just reduce the informational risk that goes with it and ensure that Capacity Place is delivering incremental relationships, capacity relationships to what you're currently looking at today. Third thing is around business sensitive information. A lot of the business sensitive information that's there, it's sort of a combination of two things. You have a program listing and then you have what goes into a data room. A lot of the really commercially sensitive information goes into the data room, which is where you park it. Capacity seekers control who has access to their data room at an individual level. So you can grant access, you can revoke access. Once you have granted access, you can pull it away later on. So it works like that. And then in that way, you really control the commercially sensitive stuff. Last thing that we do in terms around business sensitive information is you can request an NDA be signed before granting data room access. Right now, this is an offline process. We haven't automated it yet, but there's a template in the template library for an NDA between capacity seeker and capacity provider. What we're looking to do in due course is actually automate this process. So as capacity providers turn around and say, can I have access to your data room? Automatically you get an NDA that would come up to say, well, please sign our NDA first, or we need to agree one first before you can see my data room documents. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do in terms of safeguarding business sensitive information from capacity seekers. So then in terms of creating program listings, most programs tend to be, there are different structures around different programs. So as we speak to different companies seeking capacity, they've often got different ways of organizing, or they have, this is what we're trying to do, but there's a question of this is what we're trying to do versus here's how the capacity markets work. And some of them fit really well, some of them fit less well. So this is just an overview for those people that are involved in insurance, and in terms of placements. Some of this will be well known and understood, but there are, in terms of planning how you present your program, there's often different options that are available depending on what you want to achieve. So just to go through these, basically you've got, I will call it a simple structure. So a simple structure is basically where you have one capacity seeker with one capacity provider. That's quite common in the US program administrator market, for UK broker schemes, and typically where you have larger insurers where there is they've got an awful lot of capacity that's available, so want to do everything 100%. So that model is quite readily available. Then you have a co-insurance placement, so where you've got typically lead follow, very common in the Lloyd's market, where you're going to have different slips. So you'll have binders, line slips, and prior submit agreements and the like, where everybody takes a percentage of that, and again through the lead follow kind of model. Sometimes you'll have a sectioned placement as well. So I call it section A, section B, but sometimes you'll have primary versus excess layer. And again, just thinking through the capacity provider side of it, many capacity providers have different appetites for risk. Some are lower down, some are higher up, or it could be section A, section B, where you have commercial combined or packaged offerings, or you have different territories that are being covered. Each one of those is, presents a different way of doing things. So as one is looking at saying, how do I create this program and architect this program, it's useful to think, does my program have these features that I might want to present this in a different way to attract different types of capacity providers that are out there. Last, we've got the fronted model. Just making the distinction between capacity and paper. There's an awful lot of reinsurance capacity that's currently available in the market that doesn't have the licenses to be able to underwrite that. Certainly the model for fronting is very common in the US, MGA and wholesale broker space, less common in Europe and further afield. But that model, I think, has a lot of growth potential, certainly around the world, to expand and develop further. These are kind of the different strains. These can often, as most of you are probably aware, they can also be integrated together. But just as in terms of thinking about what your programs look like, it's useful to design your program in such a way that it appeals to different types of capacity providers that might be looking for different types of things, rather than just turning around and saying, here's everything I'm looking for. A lot of times that doesn't quite work that well. So I mentioned this process that we use. It's an eight-stage guided process to create your program listing. The 8 stages look something like this. I won't go through this too much in depth, but basically stage 1 is all about capacity seeker profile. Who are you? If you understand this process, basically you understand the data that capacity providers are going to look at, and then we'll show you in a minute basically what does this look like as you go through it, and then what do capacity providers see. accordingly to answer Richard Hayes' question. So capacity seeker profile is all about who are you, and that captures the type of business that you are, your corporate regulatory details. Are you members of Lloyd's, the MGAA, and the like. Then the program profile. So are you writing, direct fact treaty? What classes and territories are you writing? And all this is sort of data-driven, menu-driven in terms of approach. Do you have specific Lloyd's risk codes? And again, that will help the Lloyd's market. What are the product details in terms of coverages, limits, deductibles, and the like that you've got? What's your distribution profile and source of business? So where do you get your business from? Is it clients direct? Is it through brokers? Is it through MGAs? Is it through aggregator sites? Is it cedants? What's your operating model that you've got for the business? What's your underwriting profile? And is any of your business impacted by sanctions? So that's program profile. Stage 3 is all about KPIs and financials. So like most carriers that are out there, what they're usually looking for is, show me some data on the book. That's sort of, important, I think, for everyone to get through that stage of why is this of interest. So the first thing that we ask about is about maturity stage of the business on a scale of 1 to 5, from startup to completely, mature in terms of book. Program premium, clearly a clear criteria for most insurers that are out there. How big is it as a whole? Some will have minimum premiums, some will only want to deal with the smaller element of the market. This section around stage 3 we just recently changed to based on feedback that we've received over the last few months since we've launched. So we've just reorganized it into underwriting performance and projections, premiums and policies, claims and losses, and operational KPIs, and added in some spreadsheets that you can use for those. I'm just going to show you what those are, and then I'm going to come back. So on stage 3 KPIs, basically you can then say, my historic performance and projections for this book look something like this. Between 2016 and 2022, here's our gross premiums, gross loss ratios. You can add other elements in there. The way that our policies and premiums break down at a first pass level looks like this, and every book of business will be different in terms of how it's split up. But what it does do is it gives carriers a sense of, a first pass overview. Okay, I got it. I understand what the makeup of this particular book is. Then it goes into claims and losses, is sort of that other section. Again, how many claims have you had, what's paid, what's outstanding, average cost per claim. You can add in additional items, but we're just trying to capture some of the basics to help carriers understand what exactly is this book of business. And then operational KPIs in terms of business profile and business conversion rates. Again, what do those look like, again, to help carriers understand what the profile of the book looks like. After stage 3, you go into stage 4 around supporting information. So this is sort of what information do you have to help guide us through the process. A lot of that is a big tick box exercise to say, if you need it, this type of information is available. At that stage, you can then add documents either to a public documents repository or to the data room. And you don't have to do that right away, but the public documents repository is for, if it's in there, any capacity provider that has access to your program can see those. For any documents that you add to the data room, and that would be typically things like business plans, bordereau, underwriting guidelines, et cetera, would only be available to those capacity providers that you've specifically granted access. Then it comes into capacity and licensing requirements. So again, we've changed some of the questions around here just recently for those that existing users that are out there. So, who is your existing capacity support or historic capacity support? Why are you seeking capacity? As such is, there's lots of often different reasons, and it could be to diversify because existing carriers are pulling out, you're concerned, channel conflict, et cetera, et cetera. What type of agreement are you looking for? So is it a binder, a line slip? Is it a treaty? Is it a fronting agreement? Do you need claims handling authority? Do you have minimum financial strength ratings? So we use the AM Best scale from, I don't need any ratings at all to, I need A- or A+ rated security. Do you have specific US or EU licenses? And again, it's one of those things that helps carriers out. US, so admitted versus ENS, and EU licenses, your class 1 to 18. And are there any other, in terms of program structures, are there anything else in terms of commission structures that you want to propose or suggest at this particular stage in time? Then it goes into fitness and propriety checks. So this is more, have you had any problems in the past? If so, just please articulate them. Then listing profiles and options, which are really about marketing options for the program. So title, target placement date, who the program representative is, i.e. who should the capacity provider contact? Is it a broker? Is it a person that's there? And the like. We talked a little bit about confidentiality settings and anonymity settings. So confidentiality settings allow you to hide your program from specific risk carriers, and anonymity settings allow you to hide your identity. So hiding your identity means hiding who you are in terms of your company name, information, anything that's identifiable as you, but you want your profile out there for carriers accordingly. And sometimes you get that. Last thing is just the consents that take place in terms of authority to sign. We want to ensure quality, so we ask that there be no material inaccuracies in the information that's provided, and then agreement to commercial terms. So once you've done that, then the program gets authorized, and once it's authorized, it then goes live. Then I'll just go through a quick demo. If you bear with me, and I need to figure out how to do this, right? Okay. So if I'm on Capacity Place, this is the public website for this. For those that are interested in the template library, it's just under here, under support, template library. And the template library contains a whole set of documents, different trading agreements. Some of them are our own that we've created. Some of them are links to other sites that have created them. But it's got different elements of governance, underwriting authority letters, business plans, program financials, risk profile templates, underwriting guidelines, complaint logs, IPID templates. They're all done in editable Microsoft Office formats. We've done this for the good of our program community to help everyone basically do things, find a resources out there. Many of these documents are hard to find. They sit buried within our industry or within different companies. What we've tried to do is just make it explicit and easier for everyone to be able to create programs and the relevant documentation that's needed. So that's the template library. I'm just going to go into the site. So this is me going in as a capacity seeker. So as a capacity seeker, I go in, and what I get when I go onto the site is my this is what we call my dashboard. So on here I have two things. Basically my profile details, who am I, which is just normal stuff in terms of my program, and then my programs that you can go into. And under my programs here, it's got a number of different items. So these are the actual, this was actually the account that was used to create all the example programs on the site. Example 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we just put up some examples, and then these are actually the same ones that are used in the demo. So I'm gonna just pick one, which is UK SME commercial combined. So if you go into that particular program, what you have up top is the 8 stages. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 up top. You can navigate from these little ball icons at the top or down at the bottom. To add a program, basically you just complete the question set. And these are the questions pretty much that I just went through with you in that one slide of, what type of capacity seeker are you, and insurance intermediary, non-insurance intermediary, et cetera, et cetera. These questions refer to the cover holder. So if you're a placing broker, this refers to your client. If you're an MGA or as such, then it refers to you. So here you can enter in, all that information that's there, as we discussed. I just want to see if there's anything else here that I want to highlight in particular, because we kind of went through just that quick information already. Maybe I'll ask the question, is there anything in particular that people want to see around this side of it?
Nope.
Maybe not. Okay, great. So once you are So if you get the fact that it's just a big long question set that you go through, what you can then do is you can then view the program. I think I picked a different one, but when you view the program, this is basically the view that capacity providers would see. So what they would see is all the things that you've just done for taking the 8 stages of information. It takes a lot of that and basically dumps it on here. Actually, I'll just go back into the, and then what it does is it basically takes all the information that's there and dumps it onto a form. It puts it into a form that what a capacity provider would look at. You know, you'd see program title, program ID, who the capacity seeker is, what classes and territories are represented, what the premium looks like, what are the products limits, what licenses are required, what Lloyd's risk codes, what are the KPIs and financials of the book. Accordingly, what capacity are you looking for in terms of whatever you've specified? What supporting information do you have that's available for this? And these, again, these are all just tick boxes that, you know, you just say, yeah, I have this or I don't have this, et cetera, et cetera. Who the capacity seeker actually is in terms of the, you know, their company. Fitness and propriety checks. So in terms of responses to the fitness and propriety questions. And if there's been anything that's out there, attachment of public documents and attachment of data room documents. And I haven't actually added any here for this, but if this didn't have one, you'd have a basically a lock logo on there to show that there's nothing that's that you can't access that basically. When a capacity provider comes in, what they would see here, the right-hand sidebar would be a little bit different because we're looking at this as a capacity seeker, but what they would say is, they'd see is view LinkedIn profile, they would see contact the program representative, which would then bring them to a chat facility. They'd also have share with a colleague. So again, here what we're trying to do is make it easy for a capacity provider who turns around and goes, I've looked at this program. It's not quite relevant to me, but it's relevant to my colleague here or there. And also, I think what we also get is different business development people that are joining Capacity Place who are there almost acting like a front-end business developer for different underwriting departments within their organizations. So again, they look at this and they go, this is where, you know, this would be interesting to Mary over here or Joe over to there accordingly, and then, you know, route that on. That's been sort of the way that it's been designed, is to help facilitate quick communication to get this into the hands of the right people so that conversations can start quicker and there can be more demand overall. Richard, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yep, in more ways than one, but thank you, that's good.
Okay, I'm trying to see if there's anything else that was.
Hi, Mark. Sorry, Perry, just one quick question.
Sure.
So if you want multiple capacity, if you'd prefer, let's say, to have 2 or 3 carriers, so, did you explain? I didn't know how that would work, because there would be potentially different appetites, percentages, to get a profile. How do we fit that in?
Yeah, so the way that we do that is more in the when you articulate out what type of capacity you're looking for, you can specify that out accordingly to say, you know, if you already have capacity, you can say, well, what we're doing is we're looking for capacity to sit alongside what we currently have, or we're looking to build a diversified panel. So the program itself, the way where that would come through, and it may not quite be there yet, it would be in the capacity sought section, which is, I have an slight update to make there, but there's a question that's here which we haven't quite yet updated, which is what is the proposed structure of the program? So where you have a proposed structure of the program, there you would identify out, you know, we're looking for multiple capacity providers to be on this program, or this is the intended structure of it.
Yes, I see. So, because it may be the case that your preference might be to have 2 or 3, but you know, you will take one if one's interested. So,
Absolutely.
it's one of those things that there would be if you do have sort of 3 interested parties, one of them might sort of like it so much they'd like to have 50%. There would be some sort of negotiation, or there has to be some discussion backwards and forwards to work that out. So how does that formulate itself?
What we're trying to do from a capacity play perspective is bring the right parties to the conversation. There's inevitably the negotiation that then takes place afterwards, which is some markets will only want to do things 100%. Some will only want to be a follow line. Some will only want to be lead. Like everything is. Some will only have, some won't quite have the right licenses that are needed. Some will have reinsurance. So the platform isn't designed to try to structure agreements and put the agreement in place. So it's not a placing platform like a white space or a PPL or something like that. What it's intended to do is to get more markets to look at the programs quicker so that you can have those conversations.
I think the point to make to Perry is capacity place is not really an exchange as such. It's like Marcus said, it is more like a sort of a it tends to refer to dating site for capacity seekers and capacity providers. I tend to use sort of more the sort of analogy of it's virtual of the old Lloyd's coffee house where folks go around with their business and try to find someone interested.
So it kind of goes a bit offline when it gets to a certain stage, let's say, once the interested parties have been identified.
Correct.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks very much.
That's absolutely correct.
Ashley Madison.
So it's funny because we had the analogy of it's like a dating site, and the dating site is I'm looking for someone to marry, and then once you get married, great. But if you do, if it was a subscription slip, it's almost like a polygamous relationship, where what you're looking for is you're looking for 2 wives or 3 wives, sort of thing. But I realize that analogy probably isn't very good these days.
Oh, I don't
know. So I think coming back to here, so I think that kind of gets to the end of our session. I think we talked about template library, went through capacity dashboard, we went through adding a program, and we went through searching and viewing programs. I didn't really go through, but if you were on the demo site, I take it I'm still screen sharing. Yes.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a demo site here in terms of this is sort of what, if you're a capacity provider looking at risks, this is kind of what you'd see. So you'd see a search bar here where you could type in whatever you wanted. You'd have different filters that are here, again, for different, we just have classes and territories in the moment. Those are going to expand out. And then we have different types of sorting mechanisms as well. So this is how capacity providers, if they were coming online, would be seeing the how they search and sort and filter programs. So if we were here, for example, and just wanted to look at, we were interested in financial institutions, then we could just type in financial institutions into here, and it would bring up the programs that are related to financial institutions. And from that, with blazing speed, there is one program in our example set with financial institutions. Then you could do that, click on that program, and then you would see the program listing that is related to financial institutions, et cetera, et cetera. And then if they look through that and think, yeah, that looks really good, because I'm logged in as a capacity seeker right now, I get a different set of buttons. But if I was logged in as a capacity provider, then I would have contact the program representative and the like. So,
Marco, do you want to quickly show them what the profile looks like as a capacity provider?
As a capacity provider?
Yeah.
What a profile looks like?
Yeah, just their dashboard.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'd have to log out. And then I would have to log in. Okay, so if I was a capacity provider, it'd look very similar to a capacity seeker. I go through this user identity verification section. I've got these matching preferences that I mentioned before. So the matching preferences are what classes and what territories am I interested in, and this will be extended out in due course. But from this, you've got a whole structure around territories from worldwide ex-US, to different continents, to different countries, to different states and provinces. Accordingly, in class preferences, same sort of thing, where you can then specify out, personal lines, motor, P&C, liability. There's about 90 or so classes that are out there in terms of what one's interested in. You can mention, you can have as many as you want. Shortly, there will be a program capacity tracker. It's not quite up yet running, and then the watch list is also programs that then also fit with that are being recommended to them accordingly. When behind Capacity Place, there is a one of the things that I mentioned is that there is a database of 13,500 risk carriers with all their AM Best, S&P, Fitch, and Moody's ratings. So when a capacity provider logs on, they have to register basically as they have to indicate which companies they represent. So it's the same database that's used for lots of different purposes, but basically there's a database that sits behind it. Because I'm just, and this is my admin account, I was just punching in that I represent Berkshire Hathaway direct accordingly, but all the other Berkshire Hathaway companies are in here, et cetera, that you can see all of their AM Best, S&P ratings accordingly. And that is what's actually used as well for the confidentiality options, or what we call the Ashley Madison feature as well. It's the same thing. So if you, for example, were dealing with Berkshire Hathaway and you didn't want them looking at your program, this is the same approach that you would take in terms of indicating which programs or which carriers you did not want to have look at your program. I think that's about it. So maybe I will stop sharing and I'll just turn it over. Yeah, I think the last slide was literally questions, if people had questions that they wanted to ask, things that they wanted to know. I will, it's 3 minutes to 3, so just in time.
Sorry, Marco. I came in 10 minutes late, so apologies for that. You might have mentioned some of these things before. How large is the database of capacity providers? Was that 37 I heard? Was that correct? Was that?
Yeah, I mean, up at the in terms of capacity providers that have registered on the platform, I think there's 37, 38. It kind of grows by 1 or 2 a day as people get to know it. And then what we're doing is going out to a lot of underwriters that aren't currently on the market through all of the program marketing activities as well.
Okay,
so it's just growing and growing.
I wouldn't have a clue how many there are actually out there. Quite a lot, I suspect. I mean, do you know what you're covering of the market at the moment? The potential market.
It's there are lots of capacity providers out there, but the thing is that there's just sometimes it's book by book specific. I think in terms of the overall global market, I would guess that there is, I would say, about 300 to 400 markets that are out there that focus on delegated authority business.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but a lot of them will only be one country, another country. Some will be reinsurance support, and the like. Some will just be fronting. So, one has to look at it on a case-by-case basis for that. And every carrier, like every carrier that's out there, it's sort of like going to a doctor's surgery. If you go to a health center, someone that does brain surgery doesn't do ear, nose, and throat, which doesn't do hip replacements. Everybody does something different. And our market right now is very specialized. So what we're trying to do, more importantly, is connect a lot of those specializations together to find the right markets for different books of business.
Yep, no, that makes absolute sense. Yeah, of course. There's I suppose that one carrier has a number of different options that it might bring forward in terms of classes of business, and then you might have carriers which are more focusing on niche business and others that are more dealing with the standard sort of business that comes across.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly correct. Is every carrier is out there. First of all says, do I want to write this class? And then they're also saying, do I write this class directly, or do I support it through delegated authority or through quota share? In other words, how do I want to access this? And so each of those elements needs to be considered. Usually carriers aren't out there waving a flag saying, I've got lots of capacity. What they're usually saying is that, yeah, we're looking to grow, but we're looking to grow sensibly, intelligently. We're looking to grow our premiums. Why is this opportunity better than others that we might be considering? And are there risks of this channel versus something else? Clearly, the Lloyd's market's more developed. About 35 to 40% of premium that's written at Lloyd's is written under delegated authority. Across the market as a whole, it's between 10 and 15% in terms of all insurers.
Yeah.
And there's always insurers that are interested. Again, there's an awful lot of capacity in the reinsurance markets right now that there's a lot of dry powder basically out there. So because there's a lot of interest that's there, the issue that many of them have is they don't have access to the business because of insurers. The insurers are basically the gatekeeper to that because they don't have the licenses that are available. Except if you happen to be a reinsurance MGA, in which case it's actually pretty good because then if you're writing reinsurance business as opposed to writing insurance business, then there are actually more markets that are available, strangely enough, today than in the past.
Yeah, as an MJ, you could have a number of different streams that you want to put forward, couldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, if you're writing DNF business, direct and facultative business in particular. Carriers themselves, there's certain types of business that are more in demand than others. What carriers are typically looking for, I would say are, they prefer shorter tail to longer tail, lower volatility to higher volatility. They try not to delegate cat business. As such, they want businesses that have got track record and data versus startups. They prefer things that that there's a minimal delegation of authority. In other words, things are on defined rates and terms as opposed to leaving it to the discretion of underwriter. So systematized sort of operations are a lot more valued. As such, carriers are usually looking to limit the territorial scope. So, when someone comes in and says, I write a worldwide book of this, the eyes roll right away because they're usually looking to add something to their portfolio, not for something to completely clash with their portfolio. So, trying to minimize that overlap in terms of structuring is really quite important. So I always have this concept of adjacency whenever thinking about carriers in terms of which actually fits really well. If a carrier writes a book of business that directly overlaps with what you write, they're probably not going to be interested because they're going to say too much overlap. But if they write something that's too far away, like you're a motor underwriter and they're in energy and marine, it's just too far away in terms of them. So usually the best is when you're writing aviation and they're aerospace, when you're writing GA and they're in higher up, or when you're in one territory or you're writing European business and they write the same business in the US. Those are the good fits because it's a natural extension of their business.
Yeah, it's complementary and there's a distribution access they don't have. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. So it's a natural extension of theirs, which fits well, not something that is going to cut across their lines of business. And generally speaking, I'll speak to the MGA portion of it. MGAs or wholesale broking books, that tends to be the best fit overall.
Yeah. Okay. That makes absolute sense to me. Thank you. I think it's the ideal way to for the two to meet, really. This type of program.
Great, thanks, Perry. Any other questions?
Really interesting. Sorry, Marco, I've got to go.
Okay.
I'm running late for a meeting with Capacity. I've just sent a message. So,
Well
Perry,
done.
you can get on there and get your stuff up. I think Marco might appreciate that, and you might too. Bye.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent. Any other questions? No?
Not from me. No.
Good.
Okay, well, great. For those that haven't registered yet, I would ask you to register. It's entirely free. You can add programs. It's entirely free to put your programs up there as well. And if you need some assistance with your programs in terms of, you're now registered, you're putting them up, if you have questions, by all means, just reach out to myself or Leo. Happy to help. We've been looking and reviewing an awful lot of programs. And because it's a new platform, we're providing extra levels of support to everyone with their programs to make it better.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Marco.
Great.
Oh man, looks really interesting. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Douglas.
Take
Much
care. Have a
appreciated.
good weekend. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye, everyone.
Have a good weekend. Cheers.
Cheers.